Hello, Christine, and welcome back to the Feminine Frequency.
Hi, Amy. It's so good to be back. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. Last time we talked about some really powerful topics, which were around life transitions and navigating grief. And you've had quite a spiritual initiation in your life that really catapulted you into the woman that you are today. So we talked a little bit about that. And today, we're really going to be talking about bringing mindfulness and inner peace and how do you tangibly do that in a world that seems kind of chaotic and unpredictable. So I'd love to first start for people maybe who haven't listened to that episode or who are new to your work, sharing a little bit about the spiritual initiation and the catalyst for your own personal transformation and growth.
My story really it dates now about 18 years back into what I like to say is a total catalyst and initiation into a complete life-changing trajectory, putting me on a whole new journey as a woman. So you all might be familiar or not, depending upon how young you are, with the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff books. And I co-authored several books. Actually wrote solo in the series and co-authored with my late husband, Dr. Richard Carlson, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff in Love. And I wrote Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for Women and Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for Moms. And there's 9 books in the series. But at the 10th anniversary of those books, Richard got on a flight to New York. And on the descent of that flight, he was 45 years of age and I was 43. We had 2 kids in high school, 2 daughters. He died suddenly from a pulmonary embolism on the descent of that flight. And you don't really, you're not prepared at that age to go through that kind of loss. Especially, we just always seem to we just could overturn anything in our world. Like we were just a very power couple. And it was a complete shock to myself and everyone who knew Richard and my kids. It was a terrible shock. And we went through, of course, like a very deep process of healing. But amidst that healing, I really began to realize very early on in my grief that I was going through a very deep awakening. And in that awakening, I didn't really call it an initiation until much later on my journey when I started to really realize, oh, wow, this was a soul contract between the two of us. This was meant to ignite my power and my feminine power, but also to bring in my masculine because I had lived such a highly feminine life in the traditional role. But also he did too. Like we had this beautiful partnership that was both and like he did as much laundry as I did. He cooked as many meals. I probably didn't take out the garbage as much as he did. But mostly we had this very beautiful just dance together where he took on feminine roles and I didn't take on so many masculine roles because although he did, when I started to write solo in the series, that was his turn to be at home with the kids and my turn to be out in the public eye more. And so it was just a huge shock and one that really changed the nature of who I am in a lot of ways. But I like to say it's as weird as it sounds. I started to realize that my husband's death was breathing new life into me because of this deep spiritual awakening that happened. It was just shaking me to my core. And so that's in a nutshell. That's been the journey. I've helped a lot of women go through change and transition from divorce and loss. And many people, many men too, who have read my books, Heartbroken Open and From Heartbreak to Wholeness, The Hero's Journey to Joy. And just done been doing lots of programs and courses and classes around grief and loss and speaking. And I never would have known, I never would have been able to do that. But I was very acutely aware as a witness of my own process what I did to transform grief and suffering into something far more powerful. And I had to write about it. I had to share it because I realized that when people are going through loss, they go through loss and they're either going to become better from loss or they're going to become bitter. And there really isn't a lot of in between for people until they realize it's a choice. And of course, I also realized in my work with women that there's a lot of guilt associated with being a surviving spouse. And the act of giving yourself permission to live is really paramount to the kind of healing that woman is going to do and how she's going to live out the rest of her life. And so I started to really realize these common threads. It's been incredible, an incredible part of my journey.
Wow, I love what you just shared about giving yourself permission to live. And I think that could be said for women who go through great loss and are, spouse survivors. And it could also be said for women who are currently just going through the motions in their life and
Very
are
true.
not fully living because they're suppressing certain parts of themselves or not being fully expressed or not actually following their true path. And so they're just kind of, going through the motions. And I believe, and I know that you believe this too, that that's not what we came here for. And sometimes it takes a really challenging catalyst to shake us up, to wake us up, and to really invite us into a new way of being. So I
I think
really
women
honor.
also, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
go
women
ahead.
also they have a difficult task because if you're raising a family and you're the mother and the woman of your household, and despite the fact that you might have an incredible partnership, there are these roles that that you feel that you must be. And I think that's where we get trapped, is in that role of living into that role so deeply that we forget who we are. And that certainly happened to me. I mean, and I think also, we're taught to try and make everything as perfect as possible for our families and hold that perfect life. And, when things shatter from a life event, suddenly there's some relief that happens in that because you're not really holding the perfect life anymore. You can't. You can't. You realize this is an impossible task amidst a family and grief and loss. And you're right that women do that. And there's a lot of reasons why they do that because it's an unconscious pattern that happens. And, bringing us to our topic today, how can you mindfully change that while you can be conscious about it without having life change it for you? I kind of like always thought to myself, wow, would my life be different had I consciously been aware how much I had lost myself in the process of being a wife and being a mother, and the expectations that I put on myself for doing that job and doing it to an ideal of perfection. When I wrote Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for Moms, I wrote the first chapter was there's no such thing as a perfect mom, because I wanted to immediately let women realize, like, you got to let yourself off the hook, man. I mean, if you're on the hook every day, it's just a hook that's hanging you. Basically, you're just suffocating. And the first thing that you can do, you're going to be a much better mom if you just realize there's no perfection in your day. And then you can release and let go and surrender to a lot of the stuff that happens in the day that you don't have control over. And those principles of surrender and trust and accept kind of go throughout all of life. Like we used to write about it in terms of traffic, and I definitely followed that path during grief, was just a lot of surrender to what the day was and a lot of trust that I was going to make it through. And then, eventually, after releasing a lot of grief, going through a process of healing using that mantra, surrender, trust, and accept, I received a new life. And that's the most beautiful part of the journey, is when you get to that point and you can, really understand and see that you've got this new life ahead of you. And that's when you've reached acceptance. So, how do we live mindfully before these things happen? Mindfulness is all about really setting your intention and checking in with yourself and slowing down from the inside. When you do that, you become far more present to what is. And I know this is a huge thing for moms because moms and women in general, working women, are so busy. We are so busy. We have so much to take care of, whether you have children or not. You've got just a tremendous amount to take care of. And we lose sight of, we know we're not experiencing the high level joy that we could be experiencing. In fact, we know we're not experiencing a high level of feeling or deep engagement because we are trying to get it all done at once. And mindfulness is about slowing down from the inside and being really engaged in what it is you're doing, really one thing at a time. And also, when you set your intention to what you want to achieve, that is going to indicate a practice for you. And when you practice setting that intention and then putting your attention on your inner world and saying, how am I feeling in this moment? What is my body telling me? How am I feeling? That is going to grow stronger in your life because what we practice grows stronger. And, that's kind of been the nature. So much of our work in the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff books is about how you practice life.
Mm. Yeah, I've heard this quote where it's like, we're always manifesting something, and either we're manifesting unconsciously, which usually is from a fear-based consciousness because that's what we're programmed from a young age, or we are manifesting from intention and really intentionally calling in the things that we desire, or intentionally becoming the woman that we want to be and the woman who is a vibrational match of the things that we want. And so, if we're in this state of the unconsciousness, of the busyness, of the overwhelm, and we're not taking that time to intentionally check in, how is my body feeling? How am I feeling emotionally? Does this actually feel good for me? Do I have capacity to say yes to the things that I'm saying yes to? Then we end up, which is what happened for me, is we end up veering off path. We veer off course. And I ended up in a marriage and in a life that I was just really unhappy and unfulfilled. And it wasn't a terrible, toxic relationship. It was me living a life that genuinely was not meant for me. It's not what my soul signed up for. And I didn't know that. It was so unconscious, the patterns of people pleasing and wanting to please others, and you know not really knowing myself and what I wanted in my life. And eventually I woke up, you could call it a quarter life crisis or a spiritual awakening during my Saturn's return, where I realized I'm unhappy not because there's something wrong with me, but I'm unhappy because I have been unconsciously living a life. I've been trying to fit myself in this mold that isn't aligned with me. It's kind of like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And that's what I felt like. And that's why it didn't feel right. So this living with intention is everything. And I'm curious, I know you have these amazing books, and there's a new book that's come out that's a daily resource to help people live intentionally. But for women who are wanting to live it more intentionally, who want to live more mindfully, what are some places that they can start with that?
Well, I know, meditation, people are either really for meditation or they're not. But I think if you start to think of meditation as your quiet reflection time or your time to go inward and be quiet, I mean, unplug from your devices. Meditation can be a walking meditation through trees, through nature. But really, meditation is not about not thinking as much as it is about tuning inward, quieting the mind. When the mind slows down, then you can start to become more of a witness of your own consciousness. You can start to see your thinking, I like to say, see your thoughts. And when you can start to see your thoughts, you can also ask yourself, what kind of mood am I in right now? Because your mood is very much like a weather vane or a navigation tool for where your thinking is leading you. So, it all begins with your thoughts and the nature of your thoughts. And I think I have known for a long time, I practiced this since I was 19 years old, to some degree, one or another meditation, and also this idea that my thinking impacts everything in my world and in my life. And believe me, this helps you from day to day, like whether you're a college student or you're a grandmother, when you start to realize that you can actually change the nature of your thinking by just simply going inward and acknowledging what you're feeling. You don't want to like deny yourself your feelings. Once you have them, they're there, they're real. But if you can allow yourself to acknowledge the feelings that you have, whether they're anger or their resentment or their sadness or joy, but acknowledge the feelings that you have, allow yourself to express those feelings. And then ask yourself some questions. What are you placing your attention on, for example? And when you start to understand that you do have the power to choose a different path of thought. You don't have to stick on the same train. This is what's proven with neuroplasticity and science. Neuroscience is that we all have the ability to change and rewire our brain. But it does take that you must do it intentionally. You must interrupt the pattern of thinking that is causing you the negative feelings. And once you see it, because you've slowed down enough to see your thoughts, you can say to yourself, wow, I'm not going to go there. I don't want to go there. That's not where I want to go. And what I do, a simple practice I do, is I just place my hand on my heart and I take a couple of deep breaths and I close my eyes and I ask myself, what am I grateful for? And I pause in gratitude. And when I pause in gratitude, something shifts in me very quickly. I shift from a negative state of mind to a feeling of joy. And again, pointing to science, Heart Math Institute has done all this research on, the power of your heart. And when you tune into your heart and you tune into gratitude, the science says that your heart actually experiences joy. And so that joy, you start to allow that joy to grow. And I mean, I don't know, it's not a terrible thing to be in a melancholy mood, it's not a terrible thing, but I'd rather be in joy. I mean, I don't know, it's not like I'm in joy all the time, 100% of my days, but that's definitely what I would choose if given the option of, being sad or being in joy, especially if life is probably going pretty smoothly anyways. So it's a little more difficult of a choice when you are in grief. Although I will say that people who are very present in grief will realize and will tell you that it's not all sadness. You have joy every day of your life. Even in grief, you can have joy. So yeah, so it's powerful. And again, it goes back to, what do you really want? What kind of life do you really, really want for yourself? And if you really want inner peace, then inner peace is something that you have to cultivate. And you have to cultivate it by how you practice your day. The other thing, Amy, that I love to recommend for people is how you start your day is how you live your day. So start your day off peacefully versus non-peacefully. And we all have days where we have to race because we've overslept or whatever, but do your best to, get a really good night's sleep, go to bed a little bit earlier so you can wake up earlier and have a routine that is very inspirational for you, whatever that is. It could be yoga, doing some yoga stretching, could be listening to beautiful inspirational music, it could be meditation, could be inspirational reading. And then start your day off the way you really want to with inner peace. And that becomes your compass and your barometer. You can always close your eyes on a coffee break at work or anytime throughout your day and just tune into that inner peace that you feel. Because again, it's something that we cultivate. It's not just something that happens on its own.
Yeah, I really loved hearing your process. It is very similar to mine, especially even that piece of putting your hand on your heart. for me, that's just such an anchoring symbol of reconnecting with my heart space, whether that's reconnecting with love or compassion or joy or gratitude. It's like the hand on the heart, taking a few deep breaths, and then choosing a different thought, which is what you shared, choosing a thought of gratitude, choosing where you want to put your attention. And our mind is a meaning making machine. Our mind is a monkey mind. It's going to attach onto all the things that whatever's happening. And unfortunately, our mind also has a negativity bias, meaning that it is looking for problems. It is searching for threats that could harm us. It's doing its job, but in today's day and age, most of the threats or the fears that are coming our way are not actually life threatening. They're not actually real. They're perceived threats. And so if we allow our mind to just do its thing without training it with meditation, with mindfulness, with checking in with ourselves throughout the day, with observing our thoughts, then our mind just goes down that pathway. But like you said, we have the power of choice to notice when we're in that frame of mind. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not bad to have a challenging emotion or to feel sadness, and then we have the power to not get stuck there or to not allow those thoughts to determine our reality. And in today's age, we have a lot going on. And I don't know if it's just more because we have more media that we're getting bombarded with what's happening all around the world. Or maybe there are more things happening right now, both here in America and beyond. But it can be very overwhelming and it can be really scary for people. And our nervous systems are just kind of, responding to all these things. So, yeah, I'm curious if you have any insights for a lot of the women in my community are sensitive. They are attuned to the energy that's going on in the world. They are aware of how things make them feel. And it can be challenging to stay in your center or to maintain a positive mindset when there are so many things coming our way. So if there's anything that you want to add, because what you've shared has been super valuable, if there's anything that you want to add on that, I would love to hear your perspective.
Well, I mean, the obvious thing is, it's not about being a spiritual bypass person to limit your exposure to the media. I mean, I have personally, I enjoy a segment of news every day, but I don't like to sit and watch news all day long. It's too much of the same. And it's too, it really does like get your stomach messed up and just get you going because there's so many terrible stories and terrible
It's like,
things going
here
on.
are all the messed up things happening in
Yeah,
the world.
yeah.
Let's focus on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, that's the first thing is definitely if you're a highly sensitive person, you've got to limit your exposure. And again, it doesn't mean, and then finding the news that feels right for you, that feels truthful. There's so much opinionated news today. It's not really even news anymore. Sometimes just going to your local news station is better because it's more traditional news, instead of like, all the top media channels that you could go to. But again, or maybe it's reading, maybe it's like picking up, a newspaper and just reading the news that you feel like you need to see, whatever works for you, or maybe just isolating for a while from the news. I think like during this time, I've really encouraged people, especially with this new book coming out, to just dive into your own life. Like we went through a horrific political season in
Mhm.
America. And the world is going through so much right now. There's so much discord around the world. And so I would say dive into your own life and get super engaged in your own life and your own inner peace. And when we do that, it's a lot easier to maintain our sense of equilibrium when we're listening to the news. If you have this inner sense of peace, and also this faith muscle that you've kind of strengthened over time where you say, okay, well, some of this is just divine consciousness at play, and we don't necessarily understand what is divine and what isn't divine, what is feminine, that's at play here, what is real versus what is illusion. And so understanding that there's so much illusion happening, then you can kind of put it in a place where you say, at least I say to myself, I have a lot of faith in love. I have a lot of faith that this world is somehow going to be taken care of, and that we are going to be taken care of on some level. And and energetically, I think if you put like a white light circle around you and your family, and you really focus on that, you have this energetic safe place, your own white light circle, and your family has one too, then you will feel better just knowing that you're taken care of on some level. It's all taken care of. And I really believe that, and it helps me a lot, going through these difficult times.
Hmm. Yeah, my partner and I have had many conversations over the last few months around, especially with like the political landscape and everything that's been happening, and really just like, what do we have control over? What can we focus on? And a lot of it is focusing on our own well-being, and then being a good person in the world and doing our work to create positive change and positive impact in the world in our own unique ways. And that doesn't mean you have to bypass or ignore what's going on in the world. It's just like, again, coming back to what we shared earlier, where are you putting your attention? Are you putting your attention on the drama, on the media, on the things that we don't have a ton of control over, we have influence over, but like, where would that energy be best spent, and how would it both best serve you, so that you can be in service to your family, to your friends, to your communities, right? And I think for me that feels empowering. To me, that's like taking back my power of what can I influence in my life, and where is it best to spend my energy, and where is it best to spend my time to when things are challenging, how do we just hone in on what we actually do have control over. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that speaks to the idea that when you take action on something that you feel very passionate about, it makes you feel better, because you're not just sitting by and feeling like a victim. You're not just sitting there saying, oh, geez, this is just horrible. It's all happening to me. You start to say, well, what can I do? And I think whenever we take action on something, it just helps to feed our sense of personal empowerment. And maybe
Mhm.
that is like, maybe it's the homeless community in your area, or maybe it's any it could be like a hospice center, it could be like a shelter for women who are abused. It could be any area that you feel passionate about. But I think whenever we go to some volunteerism, if we have any time whatsoever to do that, then it makes us feel better. It makes us feel like we're doing our part, and you're not sitting idly by. Because I think that's kind of the worst feeling, is when we know there's things we could be doing but we don't do them, and it doesn't make us feel very empowered during this time when there is so much happening in the world.
Mm, yeah, I love that. And being in service feels better. Like, I even know sometimes if I'm in a funk and I show up for a client session, I always feel better. I show up to do my podcast, I always feel better afterwards. And it's sometimes we have to like get out of our own bubble in our own world, and being in service, it just does feel good. So I love that opportunity for people to, or the invitation for people to volunteer or to give back in some way.
I also think too, Amy, the conversations that you partake in too really matter. Like the words that you speak, the conversations that you engage in, they really matter to your overall sense of well-being. And and then watching that, like really asking yourself, what kinds of conversations do I really deeply desire versus what kinds of conversations am I having? And I think if you're having very negative conversations, well, you can expect to feel pretty much in the dumps. I mean, you're gonna that's just the way it goes. But if you're turning those conversations into more positive things that you can be talking about, that's also going to have a positive effect on you as well. So, there's some very hard questions that we have to ask ourselves when things aren't going well. And when they're not feeling right, or we're not feeling in alignment, those are the places to start, is like, where can you bring yourself into alignment in your spirit, in your mind, in your body? What kinds of things could you be doing differently that are going to make you feel better? I know for me, like when I feel out of alignment and I feel, edgy or just out of alignment, I go to my body to tell me, well, and I ask myself, well, what am I doing? Like what's not going well? Because my body tells me immediately when I'm out of alignment. And I'll say, oh, I ate too much sugar, or I drank too much wine, or I just, I'm not eating healthy enough. I'm not eating clean, these kinds of things, or I'm not getting the kind of exercise. I'm not exercising hard enough, or not hard isn't the right word, but enough to expend all the energy I have. And and these are the kinds of questions I ask myself. And also, maybe I'm not meditating as regularly as I need to. I'm taking that for granted. So I slow down and I create a practice and I stick to it. I try to stick to it for 3 weeks without fail. And in 3 weeks without fail, then it becomes my normal. So these are the kinds of things that sometimes, like, my daughters, they look at me and they're like, wow, it just sounds like a lot of work to me. It looks like, wow, mom, your skin looks really great, but it looks like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And, things like that. And I'm like, well, you get to choose what you want, and you get to choose how you want to live, and you get to choose how you think life should be impacting you. And you're either going to live at the effect of life, and you might as well be a victim, or you're going to choose differently for yourself, and you're going to, be your own superhero. So it kind of can go either way. And certainly for all of us, it goes either way each day. Like, I wouldn't
Yeah.
say I'm always the superhero every single day, but mostly I am. Like 90, I'd say 99% of the time, I'm like, I just don't buy into my own crap. Like, I'm just like, I'm not buying into this. This is ridiculous, and I can shake
Mm.
myself off and shake myself out of it pretty quickly because I know how. And these are the kinds of things I practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you're embodying those tools in your own life. And, it's called inner work for a reason. It takes work. And, while I'd like to say that it's not meant to be hard, it's like there's different types of hard. There's like the challenge of, okay, I'm going to do the work to show up for myself, to do the things that make me feel good. Or the hard of like, I feel like crap every day and I'm living out of alignment with myself and I'm unhappy.
It,
Like
it takes
those things are
discipline.
hard in different ways,
Yeah,
And
yeah. It takes
I know that you
discipline.
and I choose the first one, and many women who are listening are committed to that and devoted to that, and want to continue expanding on that. And it's not about being perfect, and it's not about, like you said, always having it all figured out. But I really want to acknowledge you and myself and all the women who are listening, like, for this deep work. Like, this is important work, not only for us, but we're really changing generational patterns right now, and we are part of the change that needs to happen in the world. And this work is far more than just about us. And I love putting it in that framework and that perspective. Like, it is about you, but it's also so much bigger than that. Like, this empowerment work is for the future generations. It's for our mothers and our grandmothers who couldn't or didn't know how to do this work, right? And I love that you're setting that example for your daughters. It's so beautiful to hear that.
Yeah, I think also just touching kind of quickly on the idea of compassion, self-compassion and compassion for others is really very powerful and deep part of, living mindfully, really. When you can start to become more gentle and compassionate with yourself, which is really, to me, that is the whole heart of self-love. It's not about the pedicures and the manicures and all that stuff, which is great, but it's more about how you change your inner world and how you direct yourself and with yourself. The relationship you have with yourself is the most important relationship that you have. And the more that you can be compassionate and loving with yourself, you'll find that it's far easier to turn that outward into the world and become more compassionate and loving with others. And even I can even be more compassionate and loving to a politician I can't stand, or whatever. I can look at people as multidimensional beings versus just a single, like, this is my thought about them and this is the way they are. I can open my heart and say, wow, okay, well, this is what it is, and this is who's serving us right now, and let me just look for the positive things that could happen, versus getting all bound up in the negative, having a complete thought attack about what I don't have control over. All that's ever going to do is just create a spiral for yourself of low mood, down, 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 down. And I think when we start to realize that we do have more control over our moods and our thinking and our whole sense of well-being than we really even realize. And going back to your thought about the monkey mind and the mind that isn't well practiced, a mind amok is a real problem for most people, because a mind amok creates muck. And a mind that doesn't have, and what you said was so powerful too, about that we don't live necessarily, especially in the United States, we're not living under constant threat. I mean, in other parts of the world, people really are now. So this doesn't necessarily apply to them at all, like in that sense of, you know, understanding that your mind it'll latch onto fear versus what's real. And instead of like, because it doesn't have that capacity to have to, worry so deeply about your safety necessarily. And that creates a mind amok. So you have to take the mind and give it something, an exercise or a tool or a practice to focus the attention on. And it brings us back to mindfulness. What is the power of mindfulness? It's giving your mind a job.
Mm.
Your brain's job is to keep you safe, but your mind is about consciousness, and they're different. The brain is the organ, and the mind operates within the brain and the heart. And your mind is so powerful. It's just, and a mind amok is a real, just not a good thing. So give your mind a job. Give your mind a good job to do, and it'll do it well once you practice it.
Yes. Oh, I actually haven't heard that differentiation between the brain and the mind, and I really love it. So thank you for bringing that. Yeah, there's so much that I've absolutely loved about this conversation, and I know that there's so much more to learn from you. So, for our listeners who are ready to dive deeper with you, please tell us about your book and anything else that you're working on that they can connect with you and continue learning with you.
Well, there's lots of ways that I work with people. Mostly, I lead a lot of feminine retreats. And you can go to KristineCarlson.com to find out more about my retreats. But I also have the website don'tsweat.com, and there's happiness training courses on there. And all of our books are listed on that website. And then the other way that I work with people is through a website called bookdoulas.com. I'm a book coach, written a lot of best-selling books myself, and my husband had 30 to his name, all bestsellers. So I know a lot about the book world, and my business partner, Deborah Evans, who's just this fantastic developmental editor, and I have created this program for people who want to write a book and who want to learn more about their story and share their story in a way that helps others. So it's a great act of service for yourself, very healing to write a book, and also a great act of service for others. So yeah, those are the ways you can work with me.
Yay. Well, I know that when I write my next book, I'm coming your way, and we'll make sure to include all of the links in the show notes. And yeah, thanks again. I love everything you're up to in the world and the multidimensional ways that you're supporting women, especially the women's retreats. I know how valuable that is for women to be in close proximity to you. And like your energy is contagious, and you bring this energy of peacefulness and of joy and of groundedness. So I know that, being in proximity to that is so valuable. And I'm sure the women that you attract into that space are also equally as wonderful. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your light and your love with us. And yeah, we'll link everything in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's always wonderful to connect with you.
Same.